What's up everyone, my name is Mark Hawk and today we're doing a quick diving comparison with the GoPro Hero4 Black Edition up against the GoPro Hero4 Silver Edition. Now both of these cameras are running their post-launch firmware update, which adds some sharpness improvements and overall image quality improvements. There's not going to really be any quick links, it's going to be a kind of a bunch of generic sort of scenarios for diving. We're going to cover both blue and teal water, and we're also going to go over resolutions in 4K, 2.7K, 1080p and 1080p Superview at 60 frames per second. So yeah, let's dive on into it. See what I did there? Please don't downvote this. So right off the bat, we're going to start off with some spectacular 1080p footage, and I really love this stuff mainly because we're looking at the caustics from pretty much the opposite perspective that I'm used to seeing. So we're diving into this carp here, and everything looks great. I think this looks really cool. And we're also in Superview right now. Now, when we're going straight down, the Superview distortion isn't really going to be any trouble. Now, when we start swaying left and right next to these carp trees, you're going to notice a lot of distortion on the edges of the screen. But as we're just sort of sinking down into here, it looks really cool. We're capturing a lot of the environment. You can see when we're zoomed in, it's a little murky, and all the fish seem just fine. There's no real issues here. If you guys notice, when we sway left and right, you're going to feel the leaves and stuff like that start to bend as they reach the left and the right side of the screen. You can kind of get a good idea on how quick the camera is changing its sort of exposure and white balance as we look at the sort of dark areas and then back up at the bright areas and down at the dark areas. It does it fairly fast. The new A9 chip in the Hero4 Silver and Black takes care of that rather fast, and it does it in a really smart way. Now we're going to freeze here on this guy, and we're going to take a look at these bubbles. At 1080p Superview, everything's kind of muddy and stuff like that. Nothing's really super sharp, but at the same time, both of these cameras are pretty much on par with each other. I'd be really hard pressed to say one is better than the other. So we'll come back to Superview towards the end of this, but right now we're going to focus on basically the best 30 frames per second filming formats on both of these cameras. So with the Hero4 Black, that's 4K at 30 frames per second, and with the Hero4 Silver, that's 2.7K at 30 frames per second. Now, if you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll know that the 4K resolution was greatly sharper and had much better image quality than the Hero4 Silver did at 2.7K. With the new firmware update, I'm having a hard time noticing such a vast improvement. When we kind of blow these images up in a little bit here, you're going to notice that the Hero4 Black does have a slight edge, but I'm actually wondering if through the YouTube compression that you'll even notice it. They're very closer to being on par with each other than they were at launch. So with all these bubbles in the way and a lot of this motion blur, it's kind of hard to see where the similarities and differences are. So if we freeze this frame up here a second on this video, you'll see on the left and the right there isn't much of a difference. Everything is just as sort of muddy and sharp as it is on the other camera. They're very, very close compared to how they were at launch. Now throughout the video you'll notice that for the most part the cameras sort of stay the same color-wise. There will be points where I'm going to point out what can cause the changes in the white balance, becoming more teal, more blue, more warm, and stuff like that. And we're not using any type of filters for this video shoot, it's just straight out of the camera. So the reason why we didn't want to use the red filter is one, because we wanted to basically show you how the camera looks right off the bat, and to change filters throughout the day might lead to some weird results. And they don't really make a red filter for the 3D camera just yet. But with the red filter you can also predict that the white balance changes wouldn't happen as often because the camera would automatically be flooded with a lot of color. And when it's flooded with a lot of color, let's say like red or magenta, it generally tends to sort of stay balanced to that color. So in a little bit here, we're gonna see a bright orange bag, and you're gonna see even when we bring it slightly close to the lens, it sort of locks into a sort of color profile, white balance setting. And that white balance setting is basically what determines if we get a cool image, a green image, or a more natural image. And we're getting a good range of blacks. We can see under the rock just fine. Nothing's too crunched out. These are all using the default GoPro color grade. We're not losing a lot of information. When we do look up, things do look kind of like a weird greenish tint, but if you notice, if we look down, everything gets green. If we look up, things get a little more blue. So all the bubbles in the distance on both cameras are clearly visible. It's a little bit cloudy waters, but you can kind of imagine if you were in crystal clear waters here, how far you can actually look. And what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in here about 200%. Look at some of the edges of these plants here. Now you'll notice on the Hero4 Black, again, at 200% you can notice there's a much richer sharpness. On the Hero4 Silver, things are a little muddy. It's not far off, but the Hero4 Silver, the Hero4 Black is still giving us a much sharper image, even with the firmware update. However, I feel when we're looking at like this shot, the Hero4 Black doesn't seem nearly as sharp as the previous image. Like if you look at the gloves, especially the fingertips, on the black they're a little sharper than the silver, but it's not a huge leap as it was before. So the one disadvantage at filming at 4K or 2.7K is we're limited to 30 frames per second. Now if we wanted less motion blur, we're going to have to bump it up to 60 frames per second like we're doing here. And this can potentially get us a much nicer image, especially with things moving around, and as we're sort of slowly swaying the camera back and forth, we're going to get less jitter and less motion blur. So we're in a different part of the ocean than we were before, so the water here is a little clearer, it's a little more blue, and this is that orange bag I mentioned earlier. Now when this orange bag gets close to the camera, watch what it does differently on each camera. Now it'll come much closer than it is here, but each camera is going to kind of react a little differently. I will say the Hero4 Silver acts a little more sensitive to the bag getting close to the camera, while the Hero4 Black kind of takes its time in choosing whether or not it should change white balance or not. But as we bring those sort of warmer tones closer to the camera, you can kind of get an idea on how a red filter would affect the camera, let alone just like the orange, which is again, a very warm color. But now what the camera's going to try and do, we'll sort of zoom out here so we can see both of them full frame, but what a camera's going to try and do is it's going to try and compensate for all of these warmer pixels coming into the camera, so it'll try and balance it out a little more. And that's what the red filter is sort of cheating the camera to do. It's trying to tell the camera that the area is actually much warmer than it really is. And that's how we kind of balance out the colors with a red filter underwater. And if you're unfamiliar, red filters are better in bluer waters, while magenta filters are better in the sort of teal greenish waters we were in before. And then if you're somewhere in the shallows like the Bahamas, just don't worry about the filter at all. Generally, filming without the filter is probably the way to go. Otherwise you'll flood your image with too much color and it will just end up looking too red or too magenta, and most of the footage will be kind of useless. So you can see as they're filling the lift bag and the frames being filled with that orange, the Hero4 Black will start to bump up in saturation, then the Hero4 Silver really bumps up in saturation. You can kind of see the color tones in the background changing, like the water turned green there for a second while the Hero4 Black's now still kind of blue. Again, we're still continuing with the 60 frames per second. We're swimming through all these little fishies. Everything's holding up real well. I don't really see anything. Like, everything's nice and sharp. Like, if you're used to filming with some other helmet cameras, or maybe you're coming from the Hero 2, that sort of beveled lens made everything very distorted underwater. Things would be very blurry, and when GoPro switched to the flat lens with the Hero 2 dive case, but more people were kind of used to the Hero3 case, just shipping with a default flat lens, filming underwater started to look like this. It looked nice and sharp. There's a lot of details. You can see all the bubbles. You can see all the sort of scales and sort of... so it doesn't really come as a surprise that the Hero 4 on both editions is still performing really well. So we're going to be transitioning to filming in Superview mode. Now, if you're not familiar with that, what it does is it uses the full 4x3 frame sensor in the GoPro and kind of squishes it down. So basically we're getting extra field of view on the top and bottom and a little on the sides, and basically we're capturing a wider image. So if you think of the GoPro normally filming in about 170 degree view, this one's capturing about 180 and then slightly distorting it so it fits in a 16:9 frame. basically, to sum it up, you just get more image, and it's really good for tight spaces like what we were just filming there with my buddy James filming his face. We're capturing more of the scenery above and below us. This is also a good way to kind of make sure you don't aim your camera too far low or too far high, because generally you're going to capture something in the range of where you're pointing the camera. Now this is also, again, very good for tight spots, so when we're pointing it at our face or we're in a car or something like that, but we're in the ocean here. The one big disadvantage with it here is when we start to swing the camera left and right. Now we're not doing a lot of that here, we were doing a little bit of that before, but there's a large amount of distortion on the left and the right and kind of the corners of the image as everything gets kind of distorted. Now it'll kind of seem like the image is kind of being stretched as it gets close to the edge of the camera, and it's really more noticeable again when we're swinging left and right. But for here, capturing this whole scenario, we have the entire scene here. Like, it's really cool to get a few of these shots, not really rely on it the whole day, because I do feel your image quality is much better at 1080p 60 frames per second normally, or 4K, but just capturing a few of these to kind of establish the scenery and stuff you're in looks great. It's not messing with our sensor at all. Like, everything feels very balanced here. We're still catching all the caustic rays and stuff like that, and so we zoom in here to 200%. The bubbles are kind of a little muddy and stuff like that compared to like if we were filming in 4K. But it's, again, you know, you realistically are not going to be scaling this up to 200%. I'm just doing this to kind of show you, and you kind of get an idea of the imperfections that are there, but not necessarily that you'd really see. And one last thing we're going to kind of do is we're going to kind of go into the more murky water with Superview. Now this kelp is going to block out a lot of the sun, and this area is really good to see how the Hero 4s are handling changing, looking at bright areas and looking at dark areas. And then since we're going to be going through the kelp, you're going to notice a lot of details on the leaves, and I'm just going to let you guys know that when your camera's up to those leaves, it's super in focus. It looks really good. The Hero3 Black edition was really good with up-close focus, but kind of lacked that sort of far-reaching depth. Now we've seen with the 4K in previous videos, and I believe a little in this video, that 4K at long range is not an issue anymore. It looks great, and I kind of feel even in these lower reses, like here, look up close, look, that leaves looks awesome. But I feel like in lower resolutions like 1080p here, we're not losing a lot of focus in the depth of field. Sure, it's a little softer, but I don't think it's anything you'll lose sleep over. I still think the image looks great, and it's really only noticeable when you're putting it up against maybe the 4K footage from earlier today. And realistically, only someone like me is probably going to do that as I'm comparing footage for you guys. See, like this Superview is like really cool. We're just kind of capturing everything. Again, when we kind of go left and right, things feel like they get yanked off the screen a little harshly. But if you're kind of aware of that and you're filming for it, it looks fine. You'll notice as we switch from camera to camera, there's not really a jarring difference in color balance and stuff like that. Everything kind of is on the same level. Again, this is us looking up at the awesome caustic rays. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but it just looks so cool. And then we're going to look back down. Actually, I don't think we look back down. We're kind of going in and out of light and stuff like that. And again, if we had a red filter, a lot of this would seem more natural to your eye color. Not maybe natural to how it appears, but as we start to look into these cracks, you'll notice like we still have a lot of information in those cracks. Things aren't crunched out. If there's little critters hiding in there, we can probably see them, and we do see a few as we're swimming over here. But yeah, like we're not losing a lot of information. There's still a lot of range. As we blow these up to 100%, you know, you can see that fish clear, looks awesome, even at 1080p 60 frames a second. We're no longer in Superview mode, and yeah, we're not losing any information. Everything still seems very sharp, and yeah, we'll just take it to surface here. You can kind of see how the color changes as we slowly lift up, but it's really not that noticeable. The silver is a little warm. It's got that more natural color tone, like if we had a filter over it, while the Hero4 Black is kind of slowly getting there, and it's not overwarming the picture. And yeah. Anyway guys, I'd like to thank my buddy James over at Simi Valley Homebrew for setting up this trip, and my buddy Mike for going out into the ocean and filming it for me. If If you guys don't know, I'm practically terrified of the ocean, so I'm trying to get over that. We're going to have a ton of videos coming out all before the holiday season, so click that subscribe button and help me bring more content to you guys. And if this video was super helpful, there's a donation button in the bottom left. Markhawk Cam has run pretty much 95% out of my pocket, and the money will go towards me just buying more cameras and accessories to test for you guys. So anyway, as always, thanks for the support, and I'll see you guys out there.